Pardon me.
Okay, take two on this episode. I am, of course, your host, Daniel Rhodes. My guest today is Dr. Danielle Reby. I got it.
I You got it right.
Yes. Okay, I am way more proud of that than I should be. But again, my guest is Dr. Danielle Reby. Danielle, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself now that I got your name right.
Well, let's see if I don't mess up this time. I am assistant professor of anthropology at the University of Georgia. Anthropological archaeologist by training. Specifically, I work a lot in Eastern and Southeastern Europe. Hungary happens to be where I do a lot of my research, but I also work in Greece, and then I do some work in North America as well, specifically in the Southwest, working in the Great Lakes areas as well, up north. And then I do have a local field school down here in Georgia, doing historic archaeology, working on brick factory ruin from around 1903 to 1923. So a lot of different interests, but I have to be honest, Hungary holds my heart for a lot of different reasons. But I do have a lot of different projects going on there as well.
The reason I reached out to you to do this episode is because you presented a really great poster. It was preservation, conservation, and exhibition. So, what made you want to design your poster around those three things?
Yeah, well, I have to be honest. There are a number of colleagues that I should also acknowledge who have done a lot of work on this project that the poster was highlighting and featuring. So my colleagues, Ashley Lingle and Jared Seifert, there's Dr. Paul Duffy and William Ridge and William Parkinson and Attila Juha. So we all work together in the effort to conserve and preserve this really wonderful site in Hungary, the site of Vastu Magor. It was first excavated in the 1980s by an archaeologist who had an intention and goal and set out to do a quick excavation to open up a big area on top of this tell being a man-made hill that's built after hundreds to thousands of years of occupation by humans. So you build a house, you burn a house, you build a house right on top, and over time, that deposit becomes a hill. And when these excavations were carried out, they wanted to integrate this trench into the archaeological park at Vastu Magor as an exhibit. And so they excavated quickly. 2 weeks, they opened up this unit, which measures about 19 meters long by about 5 meters across. And the excavation trench was then covered with it was enclosed with a building and then covered with dirt to kind of like still look like the tell, but it's really a museum exhibit. So you walk in, you get to see everything. But this was 1986 that this was dug. Since then, things have happened, things have changed. Time takes its toll on us all, right? And that holds true too with this excavation unit. And so over time, the walls have started to deteriorate, crumble, and there have been efforts by the park personnel to conserve and preserve the excavation trench. But they've been met with various success. So they really needed archaeologists to come in and try to help. But as archaeologists, we're really good at like digging. We're not the best at conserving. That does take a really specialized individual. And so for that, we reached out to two colleagues who worked at Çatalhöyük, that famous Neolithic site in Turkey, who did archaeological conservation work out there and led those efforts. So doctors Ashley Lingle and Jared Seifert came to us highly recommended by other colleagues, and they are amazing archaeological conservators. So together, working with people who specialize in archaeological conservation and in excavations, we're able to put forth efforts to conserve and preserve the trench that are innovative, and they're really proving to be quite successful. So we're very proud of the work that we're doing. It's helping to lay the groundwork and hopefully inspire others to think about how futures of excavations don't always have to end with backfilling. There are ways and measures that we can implement to conserve and preserve those excavation units so that others may learn from them. Others can study the materials that are still in those trench profiles, and also for the audience, for the general public to come and view these excavation units. So we're trying to put together the best practices and methods for doing this with our work at Vase du Magor.
Well, I imagine that presents with some interesting challenges. I know you said there is a building on top of it now, right?
I mean, the structure is enclosing the trench.
Hmm.
So imagine that you have this big hole, and then around that big hole, they built a concrete structure. That concrete structure was then heaped with dirt. So when you're walking up to the site and to the tell itself, it still looks like a mounded hill. So it's supposed to, reflect back to that tell-like appearance. But there's not a new building on top of the trench, the excavation trench. It's just a structure providing it with some shelter.
So I imagine it being exposed to the elements as it is, that presents an interesting challenge preserving it as it is.
Yeah, so because that shelter does exist on top of the trench, we're lucky that most of the elements do not directly impact it. But let's be clear, that's not to say that nothing bad happens. What we've discovered is that because we have lighting inside, that helps to highlight different features and illuminate the trench itself. The lighting, as well as the airflow that we have going into the building, they cause microclimates to form. Also, depending on where you are in the trench, there are areas that are closer to the lights, and then there's areas that are lower and further away from the lights that are closer to the water table. So again, microclimates are being created, which causes different conservation issues to form, and for us to think about. So yeah, elements do matter. Also, believe it or not, birds. Birds are bad. And birds like to nest in our air vents and then they poop and the poop can go into the trench. So we had to like learn how to deal with birds and mice. Because field mice are quite prevalent on the Great Hungarian Plain where the site is located. And they like to burrow little holes, and that bioturbation can impact preservation at the site as well. So we're not just dealing with the elements, we're dealing with monstrous animals as well. And then we have the other aspect, the human aspect, where we've impacted the preservation of the tell as well. In terms of the profiles, in some areas they tried to preserve areas of the profiles by putting on a clay render. But over time, that clay render has separated and pulled even more of the profile off in turn. So, yeah, there's a lot of different issues that we're dealing with, but learning from as well.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. That's one of those things that, you workshop and solve one problem and then you immediately have to move on to the no to another one, or it creates a new problem in itself. Like you deal with the birds and then you have something else to deal with after the birds, or even worse, the return of even more birds.
Yes. Oh, they are very persistent.
Yeah. That's probably the worst thing about birds is they can just leave. They can come and go. They're never there for you to like permanently like remove or humanely. I say that as humanely as possible, just
Hey,
politely,
of course.
yeah, politely yet firmly ask the birds to leave, but then they come back because they're birds.
And we're not anti-birds by any means. Love birds, just don't love them roosting in our air vents and pooping in the tell. Like these are things that we try to mitigate
Yeah. So
humanely.
humanely, let's stress that humanely, because conservation, we not only mean that archaeologically, but environmentally also.
Absolutely.
Big fans of conservation. It's in the title of the poster. So, how do you go about exhibiting this to people who are, let's say, geographically challenged?
So the best way to explain where the site is located is by comparing it to things that people might be more familiar with. So when I say the Great Hungarian Plain, people are like, huh, what is that? It's a big alluvial field. So imagine like rolling through Ohio. Dayton, Ohio-ish area. We got some nice rolling hills, but a lot of like agricultural land. It's very similar to that on the Great Hungarian Plain. It's rather flat, but a lot of agriculture occurs there. And then things that stick out in the landscape are going to be any of these little hills that we see along the way. And then, just more broadly speaking, if you're wanting to know where Hungary is, think about Europe, then go all the way to the east. Stop. You're probably like Ari in Ukraine. Go back. Uh, go closer to Italy, and we're pretty close to Italy. Like we're just like slightly north and to the east of Italy. Yeah, and so we're on the Balkan Peninsula more or less, like just north of the Balkan Peninsula.
So let me ask you this, since you said it is in the Balkans, has the site been affected by any of the conflicts that have happened since 1914?
So that is a complicated question. No, the site is fine in terms of any political unrest that has occurred. Because the site wasn't excavated until 86, with this big excavation unit occurring in 86, there hasn't been any fallout due to eh, conflicts, regional conflicts in the area. We're good to go there.
Okay.
Site is safe.
Yeah, because that's one thing, I want to ask, like conservation. It's in an area of the world that happens to be heavily invaded and then uninvaded and then invaded yet again.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that we've seen from the prehistoric past onwards, actually. This is a really ideal area. It becomes kind of a melting pot from prehistoric times onwards. So, as a prehistoric archaeologist, and specifically, I'm a Neolithic archaeologist, late Neolithic archaeologist working in this region. So, my time period is about 5,000 to 4,500 BC. That's my real big specialty for this area. But from the late Neolithic onwards, this part of Europe is just attracting people because it's such arable land. There's so many rivers that act as like highways to different resources that are available in the mountainous areas, all surrounding the Carpathian Basin. And so like it becomes really attractive for people, and this continues to today. People keep going to this area, conquering or unconquering it, coming and going. We see it from the Ottoman Empire comes over. We see the Mongols invade too. We have a lot in terms of even during Soviet times. So it tends to still be a very attractive place for people, though we see it become an area that, because of that, has a really rich, mixed, or unique history too.
So let me ask you this. Have you like found artifacts? Like I know you found artifacts from the Neolithic era, but have you found artifacts that show those various signs of occupation? Like I know you're not going to find just like a Soviet tank buried in it, hopefully.
Thank goodness, no, we do not find Soviet tanks at the Televeste Magor. No, while we don't find that at this site, it's not to say that other archaeological sites you don't have the presence of different episodic events from the past. For my own research, looking at interactions between Neolithic cultures during the late Neolithic, we see a lot of trade and interaction occurring, and we can model that through the exchange of different materials from ceramics to chipstone tools. But the direct presence of like Russians and Soviets in Hungary, you're gonna find those items that are marked with like military insignias and stuff like that at certain like military and historic archaeological sites. Less so at the site of Magor.
Okay, so you did have a 3D model of the site. You want to take us through that real quick?
Sure. That actually might be very helpful for people. All right. I want to zoom out actually. Let me go full screen and then maybe I can zoom out. Oh no. I told you this thing is very persnickety.
So you told us how wide it is. How deep are we looking at here?
So we can go up to around 5.5 meters of deposition in some parts. I am going to just refresh this because then when it loads it, it will all be brand new.
There we go.
There
That's
we
that's
go. Oh,
beautiful.
I'm sorry. So in some areas, we have like 5.5 meters, but it goes actually up to around mm, about 7.5 meters of deposition down here in the lower parts. So you can see it right here. So when you're first entering the Tell of Vastu Magor, remember it has this structure. So it is enclosed, and you walk into the entrance right here, and there's a viewing platform, and the viewing platform wraps around this way. So people can come in, walk along the edge, and it is like there's a fence up. You're not going to fall over or anything like that. It's very safe. And then, as the archaeologists that are dealing at the site, there's a gate right here, and we can go down this ladder and then enter into the tell itself, so that we can carry on with our conservation and preservation efforts. But the nice thing is that when they were doing the excavations in '86, they were trying to expose and highlight certain features at the site. So just a warning, there are skeletal remains, but they do date to prehistoric times, representative of peoples that are no longer around today. And so there's no indigenous local communities that have a say in whether or not they wish this to be presented or not. Everybody working at Base Dumagor, all the local Hungarians and everything like that, they are fully supportive of these materials being displayed. So there's no contention there. I just wanted to specify and highlight that.
No, I was actually just getting ready to ask that. Since you have those remains on display, have you had any pushback from the local community? And it sounds like they've been very open-minded about the process.
Right. Well, nobody is actually claiming that they are descendants from these 7,000, 8,000 years ago. So, or 7 to 5,000 years ago. So luckily there's no issue here. But should anybody voice any concerns, we'd definitely be open to hearing about it, as would the director of the Vestimogar Park. So burial is one thing that's highlighted, but we have several other features too. Here we have a shell midden over here. We have household areas as well. There's one right here as well as one right here. We have different activity zones that are represented by these are loom weights. We have a bunch of different like animal schools that are represented. There is the Bronze Age component right up here. So this is the last period of occupation on the site. And then from the Bronze Age, you can go down to the Neolithic periods are going to be our lowest occupation periods down here. Yeah, so there's a lot, and then early Copper Age stuff that's being displayed as well. So a lot of different time periods are represented. But the nice thing about this 3D model is that it also shows you how things are not preserving well at the site and some measures that have been implemented by the park. So if we look at this area right over here, you can see it's like kind of caving in, and that's due to erosion processes. And so the site is just like excavating itself, if you will, but not in a systematic way and not in a way that we can recover data from. And so the park, because of this big area that was kind of just eroding away, they put on this clay plaster. But this clay plaster, again, it's like pulling the stratigraphic profile and the stratigraphic sequences in the profile off of the wall. It's not actually preserving it. It's doing a very bad job of that. So when that happens, when the wall falls, it brings down all this material too with it. So it's highly problematic. And again, you can see another example of this clay plaster rendering being put on over here. So a couple different things that we can view here in this image.
So that clay plaster, do they have to reapply that every so often, or that's like a for now type of measure that's being taken?
It's a for now type of measure. I will say that this imagery was taken back in 2022. And since then, we've removed that plaster rendering and we've put in clay bricks. The clay bricks don't do the same thing where they like pull material away. In fact, they allow moisture to kind of like move between the layers in a good way, not like I'm going to build up mold sort of way, but like in a, okay, the wall is breathing and it's happy sort of way. And the only thing that's going to be eroding now are those clay bricks that are actually made out of the material from the tell itself. So we're taking back the profiles on the walls of the tell, so these profile walls, we're cleaning them back so that it's flush and you're exposing a whole new like profile. So you have a nice clean stratigraphic sequence that you're viewing. And then we're taking the spoils from those small excavations. We're talking about like sometimes it's 5 to 10 centimeters of profile that we're removing. You take the profile dirt, you go and screen it, and then you mix it with perlite and straw and water. And you can create a nice mixture for creating bricks. Then we bring those bricks back in and we start stacking them up and putting this mortar between them too, so that you're actually making a nice strong wall. The wall goes in, and then on top of that, you put a clay final render on top, and then you can paint back in the stratigraphic sequences that you've exposed through your excavations. So for the viewer, it looks just like it should. It looks like a profile that has those stratigraphic sequences. But for the archaeologist and for the conservator, what we see is something that is more or less a sacrificial wall, right? It's the only thing now that's going to be deteriorating over time, and it can be fixed over time, as opposed to these walls where you mentioned like just slapping on some more render. That's not going to work because it just makes it heavier and it doesn't actually stabilize it.
So it's like recycling.
What we're doing is a big upcycle. Yeah, we're recycling. We are taking dirt, we're making it into bricks, and we're putting it back in.
So everything you're using to preserve the site is actually already there to do it with. You're not having to bring in like outside materials to do that on a, I guess, a regular basis.
The only outside material that we're bringing in is perlite. And perlite is a nice mixture to allow for that moisture flow to occur. So it makes things not too dry, not too wet. Perlite helps to absorb some moisture, but to actually maintain some consistency. The straw is actually from the site as well. So there's tall grasses that are grown all around the site and they're harvested. And then we take that straw and we mix it into the brick mixture as well.
So is the work that's been done on this site still ongoing, or are you like still excavating at this site? Because I can tell that's a very elaborate
Yeah, and
mixture.
I can stop sharing. Sorry. We don't need to keep looking at that. Yeah, so the site work is still ongoing. When we started this project, and we started it in 2021, where the archaeological conservators came out for the first time, they visited the site. We put in all these environmental monitoring boxes throughout the site so that we could start collecting data about the environment. And that's how we learned about the microenvironments that were occurring. So starting back in 2021, we were so young and rosy-eyed, and we were like, oh, it's only going to take a couple years. But as all projects go, we fooled ourselves. And the project is still ongoing. We are hoping to wrap up this initial phase of conservation efforts where we're taking back all those profiles and then putting in the clay bricks. We're hoping to wrap that up next year. So we do have a season coming up this summer, and that's going to be our July Vase du Magor season. That will last from July 1st to the 28th. We have students from the University of Georgia going, students from University of North Georgia, students from York, from Oslo University, from Kiel University. It's a very international project, and one of the big goals of that project is to have this student involvement, but it's not just about involvement, it's student training. And they're being taught not only archaeological excavation methods and techniques, but they're learning cutting edge, innovative conservation techniques and methods as well. So it's a really wonderful program in which we're able to train a lot of students, and we're very grateful that we're able to do that.
So let me ask you this. You take students on a regular basis. What advice do you give students who are going on an international project? Because I know I get this question a lot from people who are like, so I'm going out of the country for the first time, especially like freshmen and sophomore age students who have never actually been out of the country before.
So, my number one advice for students is to go in with an open mind. Not only should you be open-minded because you're going to learn a lot of new things, but be ready to pivot, be flexible. Nothing is going to go according to plan, ever, ever. I
No.
speak from years of experience. And the more you stress about it or try to control it, the more it's going to upset you, disappoint you. It's not worth it. Be flexible, go with the flow and enjoy it. That's the best thing. Like you're doing something that you never thought you would do. You're doing something that's new and exciting. Enjoy it. And the best way to enjoy it is by being flexible and having that open mind.
So you take students with you, what kind of restrictions do they have on people visiting the site? Because I know it's for like an actual educational purpose, so the travel restrictions are probably a little different.
No, I mean, it's an archaeological park. And so because of that, people come all the time to the park. The park is called the Vastu Magor National Park, and it's in association with the town of Vastu. The town of Vastu has about 7,000 people total. Every year, this park attracts over 7,000 people, so doubling the size of the local town and population, which means it's a big economic hub for the city itself. And so the park and the park personnel are always encouraging people to come. Once you come to the park, there's different aspects or of the park and different things you can do. You can visit a reconstructed monastery. You can visit the reconstructed longhouses and prehistoric sections. There's a walking pathway that you can take. There is a little pathway that takes you to like this circle of busts of famous authors from the Great Hungarian Plain. All right. So it's just a nice walking area. You can also see the longhorn cattle that are out grazing in the tall grasses. And then there's the museum component, as well as the exhibition of the in situ excavation trench that you can visit. And those are two of the highlighting areas of the park. And then after a nice day touring the archaeological park, you can enjoy a cappuccino or a cold beer at the local gift shop and cafe.
Okay, I love that it's both a gift shop and a cafe that has, beer and coffee because
Yes, of course. It's
yeah, I
the best
mean,
of all worlds.
after when you start your field work, you need the coffee. After you're finished with your field work, you need the beer.
I mean, you're not wrong. And if you want some pickled vegetables, they also have those there in the gift shop too, made in the town of Bastu.
Okay, that's awesome. And now I want to go to the town of Vastu.
Well, you should. Everyone should. It's a wonderful town. We've been working there. So my colleagues have worked there since the late 90s, and I've been working there since the 2000s. So we have a long-standing history with the town of Vastu, with the people that live there, and it's such a good relationship that all archaeological projects should endeavor to achieve with the local communities that they're working with.
Well, Danielle, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Daniel. I really appreciate it. If anybody has any questions, they're welcome to reach out. And it would be remiss of me not to mention we do have an Instagram account, so people should follow us. Yeah, hashtag Save Magor.
Yeah, and so all that information plus the 3D model that Danielle shared with us will be in the description of this video for you to click through and enjoy.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.